Hi, I'm Kaz. Welcome to Sew Focus on Tour. Today I'd like to show you how to make a child's dress, and I'll be making it in this fabric for my granddaughter for Easter. We'll start off with having a look at the pattern and looking at how to read the pattern and how to trace the pattern, and then we'll cut out the fabric, and then in the next episode I will show you how to make it. When you select your pattern, you'll notice on the front of it, it has different options. So there's option A, B, C, and D. So this pattern has the option of making all four of those items. And you'll notice that in the different items, there is a variation in the straps. So view B and view C have the same tie straps, but C is longer and B is shorter. D is obviously the pants, and view A has the option of having a button closure on the shoulders. This one is a birder pattern, and it tells us at the top that it's super easy. So if you're a beginner, then this is perfect for you. Turning the pattern envelope over, you'll notice that it has the different options here. So we've got A, B, C, and D. Now I'm going to be making option C, but I'm going to do the length of option A. So on here, it'll tell me how much fabric I need, and it tells me the width of the fabrics as well. So the first section shows me the amount of fabric that I need to purchase for fabric that is 114 centimeters wide. Now that measurement is actually the width of the fabric from selvage to selvage. We also need to look at the size that we're planning on doing, and some patterns will actually have the measurements on the envelope. This pattern actually has the measurements on the tissue paper pattern on the inside. So it's telling me here I'm going to do size 3, and it's telling me that I need 1.35 meters. If I had fabric that was 140 centimeters wide and I was doing size 3, I would only need to use fabric that's only 1.05 long. So that's the amounts that you need to purchase. So firstly, you need to know the width of your fabric, and then you can work out what length of fabric you need to purchase. I usually like to purchase a little bit more fabric just in case I had an accident with cutting out and then I've got a little bit left over. And if you don't have any accidents, then you can always make a little matching bag or a hat to go with the outfit. The other information that we've got on the back of the pattern is it tells us what kind of fabrics it's suitable for. So this particular pattern is suitable for cotton fabrics. It also tells us that we need interfacing, and view A, B, or C, we need to have some buttons. And for view D, which is the pants, we need to have some elastic. So I'll be doing view C, so I need 2 buttons. Now we're going to have a look inside the pattern envelope. And in here we've got an instruction sheet. And the instruction sheet will give us all the information that we need. It tells us what pieces we need to cut out the various options. It tells us which pieces we need to put interfacing on. And then it gives us instructions step by step of how to construct the garment. Now I've opened up my pattern envelope and I've taken my tissue pattern out, and I've located the size section, and I've also located my suggested pattern layout, and I've cut these pieces off the pattern, the main pattern section, so that I can keep this as a reference. And this particular pattern has size 18 months through to size 6, and it gives me a chart of what measurements I need to take and what measurements I need to use to select my size. Okay, so I've located all of my pattern pieces and I've highlighted the ones that I needed to use. So as I mentioned before, I'm doing view A, but I'm going to use the strap from view C, which is the tie straps. That's the beauty of making your own clothes. You can actually combine different sections of the pattern to create your own design. Next we need to check what line we're going to be following for our size. Now ideally, if you want to get the maximum use out of your pattern, what you would like to do is actually trace the pattern size that you want onto another piece of paper. So you can use butcher's paper or you can use tracing paper. And by doing that, it means that you'll get the use of the other sizes as well. So I'll be doing size 3. So if I cut it out on size 3, then it means that I'll lose size 4, 5 and 6. And obviously with my granddaughter growing, I may like to make this again for her. You'll notice on the pattern that for each size they use a different type of line so that you don't get confused as you're tracing around your pattern. I've highlighted the size that I'm going to trace off, which has got the small dashes, so I'm just going to follow that all the way around the pattern and trace off my pattern. And so it's a good idea to pop a pin in to hold your pattern in place so that it's not going to move as you trace it. It's also handy to have a ruler so that it's a little bit easier to trace those straight lines. You also need to mark the notches. And don't forget to write the information from your pattern on your new pattern. So that is the back yoke. I need to cut 2 and along this line it tells me the information that it centre back fold straight grain, so I need to put that information on my pattern as well. Okay, so I've got all the information I need there. I've got back yoke, cut 2, centre back fold, my notches for my strap and the dot to match up for the corner. One more thing, I write the size. So this is size 3. I'm going to continue that process for all of my pattern pieces. The other important information that this particular piece has is the buttonhole placement. So I'm just going to mark that on as well. This pattern piece has another marking on it, which is this double cross. So this is actually indicating the grain line of the fabric, and I'll explain a little more about the grain line when we start cutting out the fabric, but it is very important that you mark this on your pattern piece as well. Another little tip is if you place your tracing paper on the straight edge of your pattern where it says the center fold, then you won't need to draw that line. So all of my pattern pieces are cut now, and I've got them all labelled. The only one that I haven't traced off is actually the strap, because there really isn't much difference with the strap between the sizes, so I didn't feel that I needed to trace that piece. So let's get ready to cut it out. Before I start cutting out, I'm just referring to the pattern layout that was on the tissue paper, and or option A, and I'm using fabric that is 114 centimeters wide, so this is the one that I need to follow. So on the diagram you'll notice it has dots along the top here. That represents the fold of the fabric, so that is the way we need to fold the fabric, and our selvages will meet on the other side. Refer to the selvage of the fabric. I'm actually talking about the edge of the fabric that will either have some writing down the side, or it will actually have some little dots along the edge. Usually has a bit of a rough edge along the fabric, which almost looks like a frayed edge. Okay, so the fabric that I have is a quilting cotton fabric. It's 100% cotton, and it actually comes off the roll with it already folded in half. So my fabric's already folded, and I've got my two selvage edges together, and I'm selecting my first pattern piece, and It's pattern piece number 3, and on my pattern piece it tells me that it has the center front fold. Now if I place my fold along the fabric with my pattern piece facing up to me, all my bunnies are going to be upside down. So what I need to do is actually flip my pattern over. So what I need to do is put the edge of my pattern on the folded edge of my fabric, and then I'll pin that into position. Now you don't need to overpin your design, and what I mean by that is just pop a pin in each corner so that it prevents your pattern from moving as you're cutting. I have seen people do rows of pins all the way along the edge, and that actually prevents you from being able to cut evenly. Right, so at the most you should only need to put one more pin in the center of the edges that you're going to cut. Now because I'm working in my caravan, I've got limited space, so I can't actually lay out my full pattern all in one go. So I'm going to cut out my pieces as I go along. So I've got my first piece on, so I'll just carefully cut that around the edge. You need to make sure that you cut on the edge of your pattern, and make sure you're not trimming any of your pattern off, and make sure that you're not cutting bigger than your pattern as well. You also want to make sure that you're not lifting your fabric as you're cutting, so keep your fabric flat on your table and cut in a big long cut. Okay, so that's my front piece cut out. I'm just going to fold that up and pop that aside. Okay, so this pattern piece also says it needs to be placed on the fold, and this is a center back fold, so I'm going to place that up against the folded edge. Again, just placing my pins firstly in the corners, so I put them on the folded edge first to make sure that my pattern isn't going to shift away from the fold, and then I place my other pins in the other corners, just making sure that the pattern piece is completely flat, and then put your extra pins in along the bottom, the side and the top, and then I'll cut that piece out. And again, just making sure I'm cutting right along the edge. Nice big long smooth cuts without raising the fabric. So if you lift your fabric up, you can risk cutting the fabric crooked, and then it's not going to go together properly. And then just along the top edge. Okay, and this is my front yoke piece. And again, I need to make sure that my bunnies on my fabric are going to be up the right way. So I'm going to flip that over and place it on the folded edge. And put my pin in. and I'll put the pin in the other side. So we should only need the 2 pins in this piece. And then I've got my back yoke. I'm also going to pin that in place. The piece of pattern here that I'm going to cut out that has the grain line on it. So the grain line is these lines here, which means that we can actually place it parallel to the selvage or parallel to the fold using either of those directions. So because I have directional fabric, and directional fabric means that all of my pattern is going in the same direction, I need to be mindful of that when I position my piece on my fabric. So I only need 1 piece of this. Use one of the scraps sections of the fabric that I've cut up, and I'm going to position my pattern piece. And what I need to do is actually measure from this point out to the selvage, okay, and that is showing me 16.5 centimeters, and then I need to make sure that the other end of that line is at 16.5 centimeters, okay, and that is actually straight. I'm just making sure that this line, which is called the grain line, is parallel to the selvage, which is the edge of the fabric. And I'll just cut out my yoke pieces. So my instructions on my pattern is that I need to actually cut 2 of these pieces on the fold. So after I've cut that one out, I'm going to place that back on the fold of the fabric and pin that in place, and then I'll cut a second one of that. Right, so now I'm cutting out my back yoke. Again, just keeping your fabric flat. Alright, so that's 1 piece of my back yoke, and I need to then position that on the fold of the fabric so I can cut my second back yoke. And you may not be familiar with the terms that I'm using. So for example, yoke, you may not know what that is, but when we construct the dress, I'll explain what each of those pieces are. I've just got one more pattern piece left to cut, and this is the pattern piece for the ties for the dress, and this one again has a grain line on it, and this time I'm actually going to position it with the grain line in this direction, running parallel with the edge of the fabric. The reason for this is when I do my ties, I want the bunnies to be in the same direction as they are on the dress. So I'll place that in position, and I'm just going to pop a pin in one end, and I'll measure from the selvage of the fabric to the straight line that is down the center of that pattern piece. So that is at 8 centimeters. And then down this end of my pattern piece, I then need to measure and make sure that that is also measuring 8 centimeters from the edge, and it's not, so I'm just going to shift that slightly so that it is lined up with that 8 centimeter mark. So that means now that my tie is going to be cut on the grain of the fabric, and it's really, really important, I can't stress this enough, that you have your pattern pieces on the grain correctly, because if you don't, when you wear the garment, it's actually going to twist and it skews and it doesn't look very nice at all. So you actually lose the effect of the drape. And we certainly don't want a skirt that is going to hang funny and twist around your body. Right, so I'm just cutting this piece. And this particular pattern piece tells me I need to cut 4. So at the moment I'm cutting 2 because I've got my fabric double. And then I'm just going to lay that out and do exactly the same again and cut my other 2 straps. Again, nice big long cuts, and it's really important to have a sharp pair of scissors, otherwise you're going to get jagged edges as you cut. The scissors that I'm using are Soline, and they come with a protective cover, so when you're not using them you can place the cover on them and it keeps them nice and sharp and prevents you from accidentally jabbing yourself with the scissors. Now I've got all of my pattern pieces cut out, so these are all ready to sew. But before we can start sewing, what we need to do is actually cut out some interfacing. So the interfacing is a stiffening that is ironed onto the back of some of your pieces of fabric to give it a little bit more strength and body. The pieces of pattern that I need to add my interfacing to are my front and back yokes and my underlap piece number 7. And on the pattern instructions it will actually also give you the information about what you need to add your interfacing to. So I'm going to cut that out. To cut the interfacing out, we're just going to follow the same process as we did before. We'll fold it in half and then position our pieces onto the fold of the interfacing. And we only need 1 piece of each of these, so we'll put the front yoke and the back yoke on. And cut those out. Okay, and then piece number 7, we only need 1 piece of this, so I'm just going to open my interfacing out so I've got a single layer and pin that in place. And the interfacing doesn't have a grain line unless it's a woven one. The one that I'm using is a non-woven interfacing. So this doesn't have a grain line, so it doesn't matter if you cut this slightly crooked. Okay, so now we've got all of the pattern pieces cut out. We've got the interfacing cut out on the smaller pieces that I needed to have them cut out for, and pretty much ready to start making our dress. So thank you for watching. If you'd like to follow along and see how to make the dress, then please join me in the next episode and we'll put the dress together. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.